For those of you who haven't been watching along so far, I'm Cynthia Juke, and I'm a Christian, and I'm reading through the Quran because my sister converted to Islam, and I want to understand her faith better. I'm up to Surah 3, so I feel like I'm on top of things, even though I have like 1,000 pages to go. I want to say something about prayers, because in the past two videos I kind of referred to these lines that say like, Allah is most gracious, most merciful, etc. My sister sent me a video of an Islamic prayer, and it sounded really pretty because in Arabic there's a lot more vowel sounds than there are in English, so it sounds very melodious to say these words really slowly. So instead of me being like, oh, Allah most gracious, most merciful, it sounded really dull to me, and I think I'm used to that because that's how it is in the Bible. Some of you may be familiar with the alternative rock band Me Without You, and they put a lot of Islamic prayers into their music, but they're like screaming or lamenting it, which is way, way different than the slow, really reverent prayer that I saw when my sister sent it to me. So because she's a Muslim and she's watching these videos, she's been kind of filling me in on coming to new appreciation for the Islamic culture. So this starts with the same thing. Surah 3 verse 7. I'm still referring to them as verses. I feel like they're not called verses, but I'm just used to that because I'm familiar with the Holy Book, the Bible. And I have written elsewhere about why I don't consider any religious book to be a holy book, so I don't refer to the Bible that way. It's interesting here, Surah 3 verse 7, it says, specifically, it is Allah who sent to thee the book. In it are verses basic or fundamental of established meaning. Now, that's more clear than anything the Bible says in self-reference. And I almost feel like Christians got the whole idea that the book was sent specifically from God in its current state because other books self-refer that way. The Bible does not refer to itself, nor does it refer to its own canon, and there are disagreements on what the biblical canon is, but the Quran is pretty clear. It's a Bible from, it's not a Bible. A Bible is another word for book, but it's a book from God, and it specifically says those who do not grasp the message or do not have understanding, which is a really dangerous catch-22. If you disagree with the Quran, then you aren't wise enough to accept the Quran. And if you agree with the Quran, then you're wise. So you can basically discredit anybody who disagrees with you according to this. There's a lot more talk of hell in the Quran too than there is in the Bible. Hell is kind of referred to kind of as an afterthought in the Bible. And it's talked about kind of in the Bible, hell is referred to in kind of a mythological sense, and I say that with recognition that a lot of Christians believe it's literal, but like Jesus, for instance, talks about heaven and hell while he's telling stories and parables, and then hell is talked about in the book of Revelation, which is a dream, and so it's not quite as literal there, but the Quran is very solid. It's like, people who reject the faith, they're fuel for the fire. This is because they say the fire shall not touch us but for a few numbered days, for their forgeries deceive them as to their own religion. Basically, it's saying if you don't believe that hell is eternal torment, then you aren't going to be as afraid of hell. Okay, verse 28 says you can't have friends that aren't Muslims. I wonder, like, I really wonder how people take that. Are they not taking that literally? Because it says specifically, do not be friends with people who aren't Muslims. I know a lot of Christians who think that way, but the Bible doesn't expressly say that. Again, we're getting stories. They're a little bit different in the Quran than they are in the Bible, but kind of rehashing the same stories. This is the only time I've seen Mary referred to as being committed to the temple, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, which is interesting because the only other place I'd seen that is when I read Philip Pullman's book, The Good Man Jesus and the Scoundrel Christ. So he got that from the Quran, and that makes me a little bit excited that Pullman did his research. Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, in the Bible it says that he couldn't speak for like 9 months leading up to when his son was born, but here it says that he could only not speak for 3 days. The story of Mary is pretty consistent with the Bible. It talks about a multitude of angels talking to her rather than a specific angel. I don't see that as too big of a difference. And kind of the same conversation goes on. Mary says, how can I have a child if I've never touched a man? And the angel says, God does what he wants. God is like, I do what I want. And then Jesus is specified as a messenger, not the Son of God. So that's the distinction, but the conversation is basically the same. The truth comes from Allah alone, so be not of those who doubt. I don't know how I feel, honestly, about the whole avoid doubt thing. Here he says something almost exactly like Paul says. You fell to disputing in matters of which you had no knowledge. It is Allah who knows, and you who know not. Basically, don't have arguments because you're arguing about things that you can't really know about. Which, okay, you've ended the argument problem, but there's still the problem of, like, asking questions, and it seems to silence opposition. And I don't think this is unique to Islam. I'm not trying to attack Islam. I'm observing something that I've seen to be a problem in my own religion, and it's one of the reasons I don't attend church, is because I'm frustrated with the fact that a lot of religious people don't want to answer questions and have discussion. I'm pointing it out because it's of interest to me. It specifically says, do not follow men. Anybody who, it's like, it's impossible to be a follower of Allah and to be like, also follow me, like follow my name. And so that's how you can tell the difference between prophets and non-prophets. And I like that. The Bible says you will know them by their fruit, which hasn't worked very well. But the Quran says you will know them by whether they say you should follow me rather than you should follow God. As in, only the good teachers will be like, hey, I don't need my name on this. I'm saying keep pointing you back to God, keep pointing you back to God. And I think that's a much better way of judging who is good teacher and who is not a good teacher. It's really clear here in the English translation is that it says don't accept people who haven't accepted Islam. But Islam is expressly defined as submission to Allah. It's not so much that you have to believe in Islam as a religion distinct from other religions in the world, but that you must be submitted to God. And that's something I can get behind. I think a lot of people read that passage and go, see, the Quran says that Islam is superior and that they just reject everybody who doesn't believe in Islam as its own religion. Well, no, they self-define Islam as submission to Allah. And I think that you could probably find Muslims who define it both ways. Okay, I'm in Surah 3, and verses 80 through like 115 have kind of felt like the book of Proverbs. It's like listing off things that the good people do versus listing off things that the bad people do, and what heaven and hell are generally like. And it's just general stuff. Here it addresses the question of what would have happened if there's disobedience to Allah, and it gives the example of war. And there are people who out of ignorance ask questions about whether they should or should not have participated in a certain battle. If they had disobeyed Allah, it wouldn't have mattered. All the same people still would have met their death, which is kind of scary, and it alludes to the idea that things are destined. No matter what you do, things won't really change. I like this phrase. They were that day nearer to unbelief than to faith, saying with their lips what was not in their hearts. But Allah has full knowledge of all they conceal. This is talking specifically about hypocrisy and lying. And I like that they condemn that because it's one of the major problems that modern religion has, but it's something that Jesus was very much against, and I'm glad Muhammad was also against it. The most interesting thing I found so far while reading this is that there are a lot of things that we allude to in Western Christianity, especially Christianity in the United States, that aren't expressly said in the Bible, but it's very clearly stated in the Quran. It's like we are concocting things from the Quran and then finding things that kind of say that in the Bible. For instance, the existence of someone going to heaven right after they die. Verse 169, think not of those who are slain in Allah's way as dead. They live, finding their sustenance in the presence of the Lord. So they live on, where the ideas of heaven aren't that clear in the Bible. If you enjoyed this video, please pass it on to your friends, like and subscribe so it can get more attention, because I think this is a great discussion to be having. This is part 3, reading through the Quran. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time.